Welcome back, everybody. Great to see you all again. Welcome to Ugly, Irresponsible, and Childish, where two industry marketing vets talk about the unrelenting pursuit of creativity and the people, work, and culture that either celebrates it or suffocates it. And we risk our careers so you don't have to. And it's great to see Mr. Marc Levy, as always, my partner in crime.
Hello, sir. How are you? I'm liking the. I feel like I haven't seen that hat before. A little Dia de Muertos there you got going
Yeah,
on?
yeah. This is one cocky son of a bitch who we used to work with came up to me one day and said, "Hey, Baca, where's your skateboard, old man?" And I'm like, "Oh, shut up."
Wow, that's a little harsh. Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
Speaking of harsh, look who we have here again this episode. Mark, do you recognize this individual?
We are so happy to welcome back for part two of our conversation, Mr. Joe Eszterhas. Joe, thanks again for being here.
Mark, it's a pleasure to see you, and it's nearly a pleasure to see Jeremy. I'm happy I'm back.
That sounds like every person we've ever worked with, by the way. It's kind of a pleasure. It's barely a pleasure.
But in terms of the creative, you said yesterday while we were talking, you said something to the effect of, I've always stood up for what I believed in, and often that led to even biting the hand that feeds me. And nowhere was that more apparent than I think at the beginning anyway, is certainly in a more public way. It was at the Cleveland Plain Dealer. And what some of you may not know, but Joe was the catalyst behind what became the sensation of the My Lai massacre. That story, Joe helped bring into prominence. And in the course of that, Joe, you ended up having an arm wrestling match with your employer, the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Can you tell me how that My Lai massacre thing came to fruition and what happened in that
Yes,
scenario?
my name's Seymour Hirsch. Broke
I'm
the
sorry, Joe.
story.
Joe, do you mind if I just want to interrupt for a second? I would guess that there are a lot
Oh
of
yeah.
our listeners, our viewers, that don't know what the My Lai massacre was, and books have been written about this, but I'll try to do it succinctly. In
Perfect.
the middle of the Vietnam War, this was in the late '60s. There was a platoon of soldiers that invaded a small village, outside of outside of the big cities, and after a number of minor atrocities like beatings and rapes and some killings. They actually set the entire village on fire, burned the whole thing to the ground, and killed a great many people who were nothing but innocent civilians. One of, I would argue, the darkest chapters in American history, certainly in the Vietnam War. And as Jeremy had said, Joe was responsible for bringing a lot of that to life here in the U.S.
Well done, Mark. Good summary. Sad, but you're really good. Um, there was a reporter, an independent reporter named Seymour Hirsch, writing for a small, sort of rebellious outlaw wire service called the Dispatch News Service, who broke the story of these horrors that you just recounted, Mark. There was no evidence, and the many newspapers ran it, many did not, but they ran it on page 23. The story was about fading. At that moment, I got a call at the Cleveland Plain Dealer from a man named Ron Aberly. And Ron said he had gone to school with me at Ohio U, and was from the Cleveland area, and he had read Seymour Hersh's stories. Then he told me amazingly that he had been a photographer there that day, an army photographer, and he took photographs of the massacre itself. And he said he was calling me because I ran an ordinary college paper that seemed to defy and criticize everyone, and he thought that I would respond to it. So I said, please come down right away. We looked at it, and they were indeed the most gruesome and graphic photographs of the massacre itself, in color.
Mm.
Uh, the plain dealer looked at the photographs and put them on they put a whole back page of photographs, and the front page was all over with the photographs as well. Of course, the photographs shocked the world, and Life magazine called me almost immediately and said, can you and the photographer come to New York and talk to us? We did. They ran the photographs. I wrote the story for Life. They ran the photographs, and of course, it caused a gigantic worldwide explosion. Since the photographs themselves back Seymour Hersh's story so wonderfully and horrendously, they really helped end the war. The American public was horrified by what they saw, and it sort of brought the war home to everyone, and it speeded up its play. Now, to answer Jeremy's question, what bothered me after a while is that both the plain dealer and to some extent Life and I myself blame myself and do the same thing. We were all carried away by the glory of having broken this story, and perhaps also by the money that we all received as a result of it. That we somehow the true horror of it, we sort of blocked ourselves from feeling. I wrote about it, and I wrote my own feelings in a magazine called the Evergreen Review, which at the time was viewed as the literary magazine of the country. People like Norman Mailer were writing for it. The Evergreen Review took it, put it on its cover, made a major story. And the plain dealer, when the plain dealer editor saw this story, they felt that I was betraying them, betraying their reaction, and biting the hand that fed me. And consequently, the day after it appeared on the plain dealer bulletin boards, I was fired. You know, the but the I was proud of the piece in the Evergreen, and proud of my own actions, with the reserved proviso of not feeling of feeling that I had allowed myself to get sort of sidetracked from the horror of what I had exposed by the so-called glory of the exposure itself.
Hey, Joe, this gets into, something you felt compelled to write about while you were writing this, and this gets in also into, not to make light of it, but a vision, a creative vision for what the real story is here, and standing up for it, even though you know you're biting the hand that feeds you. Did you know you were biting the hand that feeds you as you wrote this, or you just thought it was a story to be told and you were going to write that and that's final, that's what it is?
Well, I knew that there were possibly repercussions and that I was risking those things. Of course, I wasn't enthusiastic about the possibility of losing my job. But when it all bubbled down, I thought to myself, well, you sort of suspected this was going to happen, so grin and bear it, and there's a certain justice to it that I saw among a whole bunch of other very mixed feelings.
Were you married
Joe,
then?
what
I'm sorry, were you married with kids then, Joe? So you had a family to provide for too, right? Or no?
We didn't have any children at
Okay.
that time.
Okay.
and by the way, Joe has not asked me to do this. I'm doing this of my own volition. I've read your book, Joe. Hollywood Animal talked about it last episode. For those of you who have not read it, it is an incredibly entertaining read. And I would ask everybody to go out and pick up a copy or download a copy. It's just fantastic.
Thank you.
But what I get from your youth in the book is that you and I think this was really reinforced by your father, certainly, that you had this kind of love for America, especially as a war refugee, someone who was given chances, given opportunities, and you had to make the most of them. But chances that you may not have gotten had you stayed in Hungary. And when I think about the massacre, the first thing that really my first reaction is always, this is something that the bad guys do. This is not someone riding in on a white hat and doing these. And I guess my question is, did forgetting about the coverage specifically, did your experience there change your view at all on America and what we what we're told we stand for as a nation?
That that process had begun earlier with me because I was very involved with the civil rights movement
Mm,
um, in Neshoba County, Mississippi, covering the murder of three civil rights workers. I had a white sheriff's deputy stick a shotgun in my belly and say, "Boy, get your fucking ass out of Neshoba County." The I had been at civil rights marches. I knew a lot about black culture. And through a girlfriend that I had for about a year, and I got to know her black family and all of that. The so I had seen those possibilities in America, and I became active not only in the civil rights movement but also in the anti-war movement. The I saw a lot of things as a reporter. Allen Ginsberg, the poet, came to Cleveland, an anti-war poet, and in my mind, a terrific poet. He came to Cleveland for a lecture, and a cop named Baginski in a hard hat came in and busted him and took him away in handcuffs for no reason except that. Jane Fonda got busted coming across the border from Canada for one joint, once again by overeager policemen. I have had and had a great respect for policemen, but I saw the flip side of that kind of oppression, both through the civil rights movement. What happened in My Lai, in my mind and my feelings, was the exaggerated version of something that I had seen creeping under American culture. A lurking kind of racism, the kind of oppressive, hard-headed and hard-nosedness about that oppression. I'd read a lot, so it didn't totally. I guess the best way I could put it is that it shocked me, but it didn't surprise me. Me
y-
lying when I saw
yeah,
those.
Joe, the work you were doing, and this is probably one of did you do the Kent State shooting story for the Plain Dealer as well? Were you at the Plain Dealer at that time, or
I
how
was.
did how did
I was. I was. I'd been covering the protests at Kent that had gone on for the week before, all of that week. And the day that it happened, I was supposed to go in at night, not during the day. And I got this phone call, and I was at Kent 45 minutes after the shooting because I lived on the east side of Cleveland. And there was no doubt in my mind that what happened at Kent was caused by an endless stream of hard right-wing rhetoric from both the governor, James Rhodes, and the head of the National Guard, who kept talking about outside agitators and Marxist agitators, and it was all horseshit. I knew because I had covered the demonstrations. I'd seen the kids. I talked to the kids. I was a young man, so I fit in very easily with the whole thing. And I wound up writing a book about exactly the fact, blaming the Nixon administration because that rhetoric began with Nixon, and also the rhetoric of the politicians, the insightful rhetoric that led to poor young people with great hearts who were out there because they had watched the horrors of the Vietnam War and had, incidentally, in many cases, seen the My Lai photographs that had been published the year before.
it,
We are not an overly political show. You can argue nowadays that any statement you make has political undertones to it,
Yeah.
but that is not where we traffic, mostly because neither of us are smart enough and learned it enough to do that. But what you said about the idea of outside agitators and the horrors that followed at Kent State. Uh, I mean, I can't help. I don't want to be too on the nose here, but I feel like that's exactly what we're hearing today. And it seems like, as someone who did not grow up in the 50s and 60s, it seems like the biggest difference is that what you have now is a wave of white nationalism that is supporting that side of the equation that maybe you didn't have as much, or maybe just wasn't as prevalent and noisy as it was in the 60s.
Well, I don't think that kind of racist sentiment has died in this country. The I don't think it is as prevalent as you say it was in the 60s and 70s. And I think generally we are a better America and a less racist America. We've elected a black man to 2 terms in the White House. We have grown past those days. I think there are remnants of it that are still around. And but I think we're better than those days, and life has improved. I think Barack Obama was a huge thing in this country, and his presidency was huge. And I think that his very presence healed a lot of those old chasms and old scars.
Joe, is your that work, Kent State, My Lai, is that what attracted Hunter Thompson, who you ultimately ended up working with at Rolling Stone? Because you said he reached out to you. Did he reach out to you? I think he did. Or what was it that drew his
Yeah, but
attention?
it had nothing to do with My Lai. I had done a feature story on a biker gang, an Hells Angels type biker gang in Cleveland that had shot up a bar and killed a couple people. And the feature story and the plain dealer and the feature story was picked up by the Associated Press and put on their national wire, so it went all over the country. Hunter, living in Woody Creek, Colorado, read this somehow and wrote me a note. And the note said, and I'm barely paraphrasing, the note said, "Big fucker. Now there are 2 of us who can write about these fucking motorcycle gangs. Congratulations and go fuck yourself. All the best, Hunter S. Thompson."
That sounds like
It's
Hunter S.
amazing.
But I was thrilled. I had read Hunter before. And I also read him in Rolling Stone magazine before. But let me go to the side for a sec. I admired Rolling Stone magazine. There was one place in Cleveland, a little bookstore where they sold it, and I would go down there and pick it up each week. And the after the whole My Lai incident, my wife and I, my ex-wife and I were in California, and I actually visited Rolling Stone's offices. I liked the magazine so much. The editor, Jan Wenner, told me years later when I wound up at Rolling Stone that they were all sure that I was a narc because I bought all the back issues and when I had my little suit coat on with my tie with jeans and sneakers. And they said, well, this guy is trying to be incognito and he's obviously a narc. Anyway, that's how Hunter and I hooked up. He told Jan, the Rolling Stone editor, how much he liked my work. Hunter, Jan liked it as well. They assigned me to do a big piece on Kent 1 year after as a freelancer, and I did. They put it on the cover and loved it. So when I got fired by the plain dealer, the after the Evergreen Review article appeared, I was jobless. And I got a call from Rolling Stone saying, would you be interested in doing a freelance article for us on corrupt narcotic agents? Can you take it? Could you take a leave? No problem. I can take a leave. And that's enough. Then I went out there. The first time I met and saw Hunter was shortly after I'd arrived. There was a Rolling Stone party, and there was this guy about 10 feet away in the middle of the party, sitting in a little pool of water. He was in shorts, and in his hand he had a hypodermic needle, which he plunged into his belly button. And as he was doing that, I kept going closer so I could make sure I saw what I was seeing was real. He takes the needle out. He looks up at me and goes, "Are you Joe? I heard you were in town." The needle in
What was
hand.
the needle, Joe? What was in the
Ether. It was
ether?
ether.
Oh,
He was
Jesus.
shooting himself up with ether. He asked me if I wanted any, and I just, barely just arrived from Cleveland. I was wearing a fake leather jacket that I bought at Sears so I'd be hip at Rolling Stone. And I'm standing there gaping, it's silliness. That was Hunter. And when we talk about Rolling Stone, we got to be running buddies and pals, and I, to this day, have a huge admiration for him.
Did you feel the sense, the creative energy at Rolling Stone when you went in there, Joe? I mean, it was Annie Leibovitz, it was Hunter Thompson, and a bunch of other, renowned, not yet renowned people, but they were on their way. Did you feel that
Well,
energy?
what was really amazing about the place from the beginning, there was a cultural revolution going on in this country. It was 1971. San Francisco was the center of it, and Rolling Stone was the vortex of it. In terms of what the magazine was about, they'd been in existence for about a year and a half. What it was about, it was ultimately the ultimate hit magazine. People gravitated there. And it was an entirely different world. And imagine I walked in, in my little so-called hip outfit, and the first thing I saw, and when I got off the elevator, was a gigantic poster of a Boy Scout smoking a joint and saying, "We believe in the cosmic giggle." Right? I was astounded 3 or 4 days after I began going there. A really beautiful young woman that I'd seen but never met came up to me directly and said, I'd really like to ball you. And I'm going, what? This is a different galaxy, So,
A different galaxy. Not even a
um,
different world, a different
different
galaxy.
galaxy. The people like Tim Leary drifted through. The Huey Newton would come by. He had a bar in Oakland, and he would come by. Partly I discovered because the women at Rolling Stone were mostly gorgeous women. When we didn't have an air conditioning system, so when it got hot, they would simply take their tops off. Well, Herb Caen, a gossip columnist at the Chronicle, wrote about the women at Rolling Stone with their tops off. So people like Huey from the east part from Oakland would drift over just coincidentally
Yeah. Who
when
was Huey Newton back in the day, Joe, or who is
Huey
that?
was the head of the Black Panther Party.
Mm.
A noted revolutionary, I got to know him very well, and we drank cognac over at his bar a lot. He was a very smart man, a revolutionary man, and in a very street kind of way, an interesting paradox. He was also a very sophisticated man. But Huey would come through. Willie Brown, who you may have read about, who was Kamala Harris's mentor for many years, who was also there with us all much of the time. Elton John came back one day after came in one day after I'd been there a year, with a little ball cap, and asked the secretary, without introducing himself, she recognized him, introducing himself, said that he would like to buy all of Joe Eszterhas's past articles, which of course to this day that thrilled me. But when I first saw him, Mick Jagger was up there sitting in a little corner with granny glasses. And then I discovered that he was the English publisher of Rolling Stone, who was there going through copy to see what he was going to put in the English edition. So I went over and introduced myself, and he said, "Oh, you're Joe." I said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Have you read my thing?" He said, "Yes, they're not for me. Thank you." So,
Another critic. Well, but to think about this, Mark, in terms of what you and I do, one of the things Mark and I will orchestrate a lot of brainstorm. We bring in different minds because we always say, the broader and more diverse you can have, diversity you can have in a room, and I mean both in terms of thinking and in culture, the more chances you are going to land on something truly different and original and exciting. And that it was like Rolling Stone was that in a microcosm. I mean, all of these people from different walks of life. Did that spark your creativity? Did that make you better, or did you learn as you was there? I'm sure. But what was your thinking in that regard?
let me tell you two brief Mick Jagger stories just to continue my first one. I never had much luck with Mick. When I met the when I'm deep into screenwriting, and I've written a screenplay about Otis Redding, and somebody shows it to Mick's production partner, and he reads it and gives it to Mick, and I get a message to call Mick at Bali at a certain time on a Sunday morning because he's very interested. And of course, I'm thrilled. They had a production company at the time, and I think the movie's going to get made. And I always had a special affection for Otis. So I call him that morning, and he's on Bali, and picks up. He looks, sounds like he's still asleep. And I say, make it's Joe Eszterhas, and I got a message to call you to talk to you about my Otis piece. And then sort of half asleep, he goes, yeah, I reread it. I'm not interested. Thank you, mate. Boom.
What the? Two
Okay,
rejections.
one more Mick Jagger story. Years after that, not that many, about 5 years, I write the uh, I write the Burn Hollywood Burn Alan Smithy film piece as a spec, and Arthur Hiller's directing it. And Arthur says, "Do you know Mick Jagger?" And I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Well, I got a call from his agent saying that Mick might be interested in doing this." So really, yeah. And then I think it's a serious thing. I said, "Great, well, let's talk." So Arthur called me 3 days later, and he said, I have here about 5 pages of notes from Mick about how the script could be improved. Do you think we should? And I said, no, I don't think we should. I don't want to feel like destroying my script. I have one more. I'm sorry, I can't stop with
No,
So,
all good. This is
bring
great.
it. That's why we're here.
Mick's 50th birthday party. It's at the Warfield Theater in San Francisco, and we're invited. And Naomi and I go up. And it turns out that there's a big crowd there. Lots of people have been invited, and I pass Mick going in. He's surrounded by a group of people, and we keep going. And we're talking to some people, and Keith comes in through the door and sort of looks my way. Right, and I'd met Keith before, so he looks my way, and he comes toward us. And now, my wife is standing there in a Chrome Hearts leather jacket, looking unbelievably sexy and beautiful. And she's standing right next to me, and Keith is coming our way, and he goes directly to my wife, to my beautiful wife, takes her hand and kisses it. And then he looks over at me and says, "Oh," and walks away. He's gone. I go back there later that night to try to wish Mick a happy birthday, happy 50th. As I get near him, he waves and says, "Oh, thank you, nice to see you." And he walks out the door. No more. I love the Stones to this day. I adore them, but no more personal contact.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no more touching my wife. But I want to also not lose sight of this, the creative vortex you were in. Did you feel that made your writing better? Did it expand your world and help you to write differently, or especially writing alongside Hunter Thompson? He was doing the gonzo journalism. You were into the new journalism at the time as well. Did you feed off of each other that way?
We talked a lot, Hunter and I, but in terms of your question about was I did it help my writing away? No, the first big piece I did on narcotics agents on the was a three, I think as I remember it was a 3 part, three lengthy parts, and as a result of them, the head of the Narcotics Bureau in the state of California resigned because they had really done some awful things, and the stories pointed it out. But the result of it was that many of the really big drug dealers in town decided to pay tribute to the writer of these articles, and they came in with little bags filled with cocaine, right? So my drawer was essentially filled with little bags filled with cocaine as tributes. I hadn't had much to live. I had very little experience with cocaine at the time, but it intrigued me. But Hunter was there, and I wound up giving bags of this stuff to Hunter and to Jan, and I became the most popular man in the office because the other staffers stopped by. Um, we had some terrific writers, Charlie. Tim Cahill went on to become one of the best travel writers in the country. Hunter, of course, was a god there, and he visited the office often, but he lived in Woody Creek, And he had this charismatic personality and a terrific sense of humor that made people like him very much. Annie Leibovitz accompanied me to Europe when I went to interview John Paul Getty, and I have great respect for it. And she was completely devoted to her craft. But we didn't cross each other's stories. We were there as a kind of support group for each other. We had an editorial meeting each Friday where we asked for comments and we would give each other advice. But we were very much our own people. David Felton also was a very talented and serious writer who was there with us, who had a habit of missing all of his deadlines to the point where Jan decided that he was going to lock him into the office before a deadline was due, and he literally couldn't get out of his getting even he had three locks on the outside. He couldn't get out, and then he started turning his piece in a day or two earlier, but still missing his deadline.
Yeah, I'm sure he could have just gone into your desk drawer and it would have solved this problem. He would have written all night.
I mustn't forget Jan because he was a real inspiration to all of us.
Jan is the owner of Rolling Stone and founder. Yes.
And the editor at the time. He was an inspirational figure. He had a terrific amount of dynamism. He had great enthusiasm. He could go up to Jan, as I did several times. I read a little AP story about a kid in Missouri who shot up the town in a conflict with authorities, and then got killed. And it was a 5 paragraph story, and I said, Jan, I think there's a really good story here. He read it and said, "Go get the next plane." And so he was accessible and he took chances. The John Paul Getty was the same situation. I showed him this lengthy piece on Getty, and he said, "Go get on the next plane." The end. So you had the kind of freedom there that journalistically that you had nowhere else. Um,
Yeah.
And Joe,
I'm guessing that even if it wasn't, this, a kind of incubator for creativity where you all work together and you all fed off each other, I'm pretty sure I can speak for Jeremy here as well, in that I know throughout my career when it comes to creative output, having a boss that just believes in you and kind of lets you do your thing makes all the difference in the world.
yeah, it did. Jan had a backup, Paul Scanlon, who was the managing editor, who had come from the Wall Street Journal. So he had serious journalistic experience. And he was a great help in terms of rounding up freelance guys around the country who wanted to do Rolling Stone pieces on more serious journalistic subjects. The cliche about, well, a bunch of dope smoking hippies, writing stuff and putting it in the paper is not really accurate. We had some people who had real experience already on the dailies, but who had left that world for partly for reasons of freedom, in terms of wanting to write the kinds of things that nobody would let them write. And as I said, I think in the previous time we got together, when I first went to my editors and wanted to interview Otis Redding and Jimi Hendrix, they didn't know who the hell they were. And the only reason they let me go interview them, I think, was so they wouldn't have to get a fight with me. So
yeah, yeah.
uh,
But Joe, I want to be. There's so much to cover here, and I want to make sure that we get to the next stage in your life, which is what really puts you on the cultural map. I know the Rolling Stone created some name recognition, but eventually your writing at the Rolling Stone attracts Hollywood. And how and on what script did you make that leap into Hollywood?
on what story?
Yeah. Well, what story triggered that, and what was your first script?
It was a combination of stories. The Getty story, the big Evil Knievel story on the Evil Cavino, the jamboree in Idaho. Um, the um, the There were several big lengthy interview pieces in that whole mix. But what really did it, I think, to some extent, Rolling Stone was the ultimate hip magazine. It had a terrific cachet. People in Hollywood wanted to be hip or pretended that they were hip at that particular time in the world. It was the 70s. Um, and as I discovered later on, many of them read Rolling Stone. The first contact I had with Hollywood was after one of my pieces. I forget which one. I got a call from a woman named Kitty Hawks, who was a very young, hot and coming agent. I forget for which agency. It was Howard Hawks' daughter. Howard Hawks was a huge name director from the 40s and 50s. Then she said, I read your stuff. And I think it's really visual and fun. And have you ever thought of writing screenplays? And I said, I really haven't. I said, well, can I come up to see you? So she did. And we spent some time together, um, and um, and got to like each other. And the and about a couple, I guess, a month or so later, I got another call from Marcia Nassiter, who was the vice president of United Artists, and she had read the my book, Charlie Simpson's Apocalypse, had been nominated for the National Book Award and was one of the four finalists. Marcia had read that book and had spoken to Kitty, and she said, "I think what you write is really cinematic, and we're interested in doing a script with you. She said, can you come down and see us?" Well, the Rolling Stones paid a lot of money. We had two kids, and my ex-wife Jerry and I, who were recently born. The I had a side job as a bartender. In Mill Valley while I was working at Rolling Stone. We were really broke and needed money. I'd always loved movies, but I never thought about writing scripts. I thought about writing novels, but not no. So I flew down and saw Marcia, and we just talked background, and she introduced me to the head of the studio, and then she said, "Well, try to come up with something, and then talk to us again because we really want to do this." Kitty, meanwhile, introduced me to her friends in the business, and she was very prominent. And one night I remember at Kitty's house where she was there with her boyfriend, and we're all smoking dope, and I'd smoked quite a bit of dope by then. And then I casually turned to her boyfriend and said, his name was Ned Ten, and I said, "Ned, what do you do?" And he casually said, "Oh, I'm the president of Universal Pictures."
Oh, hello.
So I met people that way while I was down there, but I came back, thought about it, and I remembered as I was growing up that there were a lot of people on the West Side, especially in Cleveland, who had been through the wars in the 30s between the company goons, the companies, and the blue collar guys. It was essentially how the Teamsters were formed. And early Teamsters went into these battles with the company goons. And I thought, well, it might be an interesting movie here. And I talked to a couple of guys that I knew on the West Side, and went back and called Marcia, and she said, "Sure, come on down." I told them what the idea was, and she said, "Great, let's do it." And so suddenly we had a little money, and it eased our personal situation, and I went off and did Fist. And from there on, that of course isn't even like your story about what happened with Norman Jewison and how I broke into it and what happened and all of that. But to go back to your previous question, it was really Rolling Stone's cachet, I think, that gave me the early shot. Because everyone really, I mean, every party I went to in the first year that I was down there, there was Coke on the table, just like potato chips in a regular party. And actually, once at one of those parties, somebody was trying to transport a couple lines from a tabletop, and they dropped it. And there were like three people who dove down to the white shag rug trying to pick it up. I was one of the three, but the guy across from me was Dick Donner, the famous director. So we picked this shit up, He said, "Hi, Joe. I heard about you. I'm Dick Donner." Right? And then next to each other, we lay the lines down and snort them up.
It,
So
it,
Oh my God.
it should be noted that, Joe's first script that he put together called Fist was actually the next vehicle that was selected by one of the most, or probably the most iconic actor of that time, and that was Sylvester Stallone. Right after Rocky, that was his first movie.
Yeah,
right.
and I it's you're right. It's a long story. Again, read Hollywood Animal because it's a great read. But as I was reading it, the thing that I was most surprised by is that your troubles, your conflicts with, really everybody involved in that movie, from Stallone to Norman Jewison to everything you had to kind of go through and fight through. I'm surprised you didn't turn your back on Hollywood. Fuck this. I'm a successful author. I'm a successful reporter. What the hell am I killing myself, for this stuff?
Well, but there was also a weight on the other side, which was, yes, I did have a successful book critically. It didn't really sell very many copies. I was working as a bartender on the side. Rolling Stone didn't pay very much money, and I had two kids. Suddenly, I had two kids, and this potentially, there was. I never wanted much in the beginning and later on in screenwriting. I just wanted some money to keep everybody comfortable. I never imagined being wealthy. All of those things, it didn't matter. But that also outweighed it, and the battle with Stallone was a real battle. And of course, now we're best friends. Through the years, there's been a real friendship that's been formed. But that was a real battle. But Norman Jewison, we fought a lot, but we loved each other. Norman, if somebody said to me, "Who was your greatest influence and your mentor in Hollywood after 50 years?" It was Norman Jewison. Um, the uh, the he was a feisty and smart and good-hearted man because he took this kid from Rolling Stone who had such an ego that when Jewison suggested something in the script, when I wrote something, wrote a speech that was 15 minutes long, a monologue, in a,
That's a long movie.
in a 500-page script.
Oh,
Uh,
and scripts are usually about 120, right, Joe? Yeah.
Jewison reads it, and we have our first meeting afterwards, and he's got it in his hand, and he says, "Kid, you've got a fucking monologue in this that's 15 minutes long. Okay, 15 minutes of talking on the screen. You understand that?" And I had the balls and the stupidity to turn to him and say, "Yeah, but if the words are good words, Norman, why won't that work?" He picked it up and threw it at me. It just missed me. It said a few words to boot, but and we kept fighting over stupidity. In order once to change my mind, because we'd been in a fight, I was staying at his house in Malibu, and I come back from dinner with someone. I see in the little room that I'm supposed to sleep in, there's an envelope that says, to Norman, personal and confidential, just lying there. So of course, I don't have the temptation. I have a temptation. I pick it up and read it, and it's a note from his accountant saying that his income that year will be $9.5 million, right? So when I put it back in the envelope, and next morning, Norman and I are working on the beach, and in a break, he looks at me, he goes, "You read the thing, didn't you?" And I said, "What are we talking about?" He said, "You know what I'm talking about, that fucking envelope I left on the desk. You read it, did you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he looks at me, he goes, "If you fucking play your cards right, you're really talented. You can make that kind of money someday too."
Wow. Well, how much did you get for Fist, Joe?
Altogether, a million, two or three. But what happened?
Wow.
But what happened was that the reason I got so much money is the paperback novelization
Hmm.
sold record price to Dell, and I think that was for 600 grand to Dell, and it set a record at the time. The final the final link to getting the money, the 600 grand, which equipment, is Stallone demanded that the cover of the book say written by Joe Eszterhas, based on a screenplay by Joe Eszterhas and Sylvester Stallone. Right? He didn't deserve it. And but that's what he wanted. And the paperback company wouldn't do it without putting Sly's photograph on the cover of the paperback. So I agree.
Okay, so
Much money.
here's the topic that I have been waiting, 2 hours to check into. And I'm finally glad it's here because I've actually wanted to talk to you about this for years. Uh, in addition to Hollywood Animal and some of his other writings, Joe wrote a Kindle single about his incredibly awful, horrific, turbulent experience with possibly doing a film with Mel Gibson. The title of the book is called Heaven and Mel, sorry. You can download it from Amazon like right now, okay? And it was in that book when you first brought up the concept of the twisted little man. Can you explain the twisted little man and when he first made an appearance in your life and what went on there?
Well, probably the first time he showed up in my life is when I was 14 years old and hit that kid in the back of the head with a baseball bat. The Because I hadn't committed an act of violence like that before. And the notion that I had done that, it was so dark. Twisted Little Man is a very little dark person.
That lives in your head, just so people know. Yeah, he lives in your head. Yes. The twisted little man in your head. Yes.
Well, sometimes they say they live between my legs, but
All right. Or there. Go ahead. I just wanted people to know we weren't talking about an actual
there was a
entity.
critic, I think, for the New York Times who said Joe Eszterhas writes with his groin. Well, that's a tribute to the Twisted Little Man. You know, he has gotten some tributes through the years. He has an ego now, so
Yeah.
before he was just this little twisted little guy. Um, Look, I was always drawn to dark literature in my reading. I saw a lot of darkness in my life. In between the camps and Lorraine Avenue, and then interviewing, people like Manson and Ned Kemper and a couple kids who killed their entire parents, and I believe that there is a kind of darkness. I believe that we are born with good and evil inside us, and they battle it out through the course of our lives. The And I guess I felt when I wrote Basic, the which was I think the first in Basic, Jade and a couple of the others. When I first wrote Basic, and the whole thing wrote itself in 12 days or 13 days with the sun beating the shit out of me, and all of that stuff that I felt with the music and with the coke. I felt that I'd sort of been by seized at times, with the kind of creative input that I hadn't felt on my other scripts. I wrote a lot of scripts early that they were very human. Checking Out was about a man who has a midlife crisis. Big Shots was about two little kids. It was a kids movie that really ran very successful in the afternoons on home box office for some time for kids. And it was about love and humanity and the possibility of black and white living together. But as it went on, I seem to have embraced material with a darker sort of a feel. Verhoeven, I think I told this story where he suddenly said, "What this piece about is about good and evil."
Yeah.
After Basic, many of them have been since then. And I think I'm conscious of that. The Not all of them, but I think that part of it, and it's that part that the Twisted Little Man writes. but there is that side of me that I think expresses itself that way. And
He's become a real part of your creative process. Yes.
um, well, the my wife has been a terrific positive influence on me through these years. The I haven't cheated on her, the which is a real change in my life after I met her. Of course, the first thing she said after we're married is she leaned over to me and whispered, said, "If you cheat on me, I'm going to hunt you down and kill you." So I believed her, so she was convincing. I don't drink anymore, and I don't do any drugs anymore. All of those are positive influences, and they are influences that the twisted little man doesn't necessarily like, so. But
Did that hurt that twisted little man in you not to juice him up with Coke or alcohol or cigarettes, Joe? Did
damn
that
right, absolutely it hurt him. It hurt me too for a while, but we got over it together,
yeah.
but of course, but I would be careful, Mark, since you're so curious about the twisted little man, you might be opening the door to something in your life, which I warn you against, so.
But it's cliche, and it's often without you having told that story and kind of made the world aware of him. Every kind of good creative wants to talk to a great creative mind about their process, right? Like, what am I missing? What can I take away from you that I can replicate? How do I bring your sensibility and your way of thinking into my own work that'll make it better? And the way that you described it as really somebody that you didn't have a lot of control over, that would kind of break in and this part of your psyche that would really inform a lot of your writing, that was fascinating to me. Whether I believe you, I will not. I will do my best to not let him into my life. He may have appeared for me in a couple of different places throughout my life that had nothing to do with creativity, but I was so drawn and you know, almost obsessed with this idea of unlocking a piece of my psyche that would maybe lead to better work, would maybe lead to, greater ideas.
Well, you know what? I think, well, I wouldn't, in my case, I wouldn't necessarily say better work, but I think it's made me more productive because I've written about different kinds of pieces. The same man who wrote Big Shots wrote Sliver and Jade and some of the dark stuff. And that side of me expressed itself, whereas before maybe it didn't and wanted to come out.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
the Twisted Little Man is in some ways, a metaphor, an easy metaphor for a part of my writing. And in other ways, it's an excuse. It's an
Yeah.
alibi.
But you
No,
know what, Joe? Here's the thing I think where whether it's a metaphor or whatever it is, that twisted little man. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you were one of the first writers. First of all, you became the first celebrity screenwriter in Hollywood, or one of the first celebrity screenwriters. No one knew the names of screenwriters of movies until you came on the scene. You had some famous battles on Basic Instinct. You told the super agent Michael Ovitz, who threatened to ruin your career. You basically did a huge story and or sent out a note to all those influential people saying, "Fuck Mike Ovitz, he's not going to tell me what to do." And where that came through in your movies for me is the heroes who were flawed, who had this good side and dark side. And
yeah,
Hollywood at the time wasn't comfortable with a hero who had some bad elements about them. And I think you brought that forward.
I think that's very true, Jeremy. I think we are all flawed. Hemingway has a great line that is, we are all broken. That's how the light gets in. The and I think we're all flawed. We're human, and I think there is this battle that goes on in certain situations between good and evil, between our better angels and our worst angels, depending on how you want to phrase it.
Yeah.
And, this reaches, of course, down to intimate levels at certain moments in life. It's that very famous Mark Twain line. He said, "Every man has a mind, and every man has a pecker, and if they disagree, the pecker always wins."
I would agree with that.
And
You know what, Joe?
age and all kinds of other things. I would,
Totally.
with Mark to answer, you would agree with that. I would like to agree with that.
But you know what, Joe? One of the most, and Mark, I'm not, well, probably very few people are aware of this, and I think I've got it right, but you wrote a script many, many, many years ago called Foreplay, that at the time Savoy Pictures, and the head of that was Frank Price. They didn't like that you killed off all the main characters at the end, or many of them. They're like, you can't do that. That's not what you do. And you're like, well, that's what fucking happens. Then don't buy the script. Is that close to true or?
That's very true. It's very true. But I'll tell you a story like that. The Sliver, um, with Philip Noyce directing it, was also a thriller. We were done. They shot it. At the end of the movie, it's revealed that the woman that Sharon is in love with, the man that Sharon is in love with, is a killer. And Sharon decides, I don't give a shit what he is. I love the man. That's how it ends, right? And it was a kind of stunning, revolutionary ending. It was done. It was finished. And Philip showed the cut to Paramount, and the head of Paramount at the time was a man named Stanley Jaffe. And there was a release date and all of that. And Stanley Jaffe saw the movie and said, "Nope, I can't put my name behind a movie where the bad guy wins." And he overlooked the fact that he's a killer. And I just can't. I was in the room with him, and he said, "I'm sorry, Joe. I love the script, but I can't put my name behind it. I just can't do it." So, Philip, you got to reshoot the ending. And Philip, I go, "My God, you reshoot the ending." We went to Hawaii to shoot the sequence. Oh, the other thing that happened, they went to Hawaii and shooting the sequence. Two cameramen had died with a fire in that area of Hawaii. So there was that additional thing. People actually died shooting this, and now you're saying it won't work. We can't do it, and he stuck to it. The movie came out and disaster. Sharon wound up writing the third act mostly. She told me. The and a
Sharon
disaster.
Stone wrote the third act.
Yeah.
Wow, wow.
I know. The now what's it?
Including, hey Joe, including the final line of the movie, which you always say to me. What was their final line that everybody thought you wrote, by the way?
Get a life, I think. I
Get
think it was
alive. Yeah.
sure, get a life. So that, yeah, sure, that can happen. And look, I'm sure that to this day, I think that can happen. It just depends on the truth is they have total control. And what are you going to do about it? The uh, the only thing you can do about it, which I've done at times, but it gets to be boring to have the same fight. I've done it at times and go public with the fact that they changed something, and but you look like an idiot because you got $3-4 million to do something and you're complaining about them changing some lines in the real world. I mean, what is that? The one of the reasons we came back to Cleveland from Malibu is it was that I got tired of fighting. And I'd begun writing books. And books are my first book, not my first book, but the political book. It was a big bestseller. And I had a contract, a 3-book contract from Knopf of all places, which is the New York Yankees of publishing, to do whatever I wanted to write. And then that feeling of not endlessly fighting, I was tired. I was literally endlessly fighting. And I was also, as I may have mentioned, I was tired when I met Naomi. I woke up one morning and said, "Who is that in the bed next to me?" And I knew things were lacking in my life. And we came back and did that and raised our kids. And Mark, if we talk about two sides of us, it has been a much more peaceful, positive, positive life.
Yeah,
The
well, you're the way you're describing it, and again, I think I can speak for Jeremy as well here. It really rings true for me. The idea that you get to a point where you don't have the fight in you anymore, where you're battling for ideas with people who are rejecting them and have opinions, and you have to kind of fight your way through all these layers of hierarchy. And I know I've actually been called out. I've gotten in a lot of trouble at times when I get to a point where someone wants to change an idea and it's like, okay, I don't care anymore. Just I can't do this anymore. I can't fight with you anymore. And people say, well, you're supposed to be a creative leader. How dare you? Well, you're not making it easy on me. You're putting up obstacles. You're building walls, not bridges. And I completely get this notion of I'm out. I'm going to go do something else because life is too short, and I'm not going to have these fights anymore. I have better
you
things to do with my time.
get it exactly. You get it exactly. You understand it exactly. You wake up one day and say, and I'm not a young man, and then we wake up one day and say, what? Endless fighting always on every single one. There's some kind of an issue. And with Hollywood, what are the difference was that people would lie right in your face. Billy Friedkin, who directed Jade, publicly said at my engagement party that he's such a brilliant writer, I'm not going to change a line. And I see a rough cut of the movie and I almost have a heart attack because the whole ending is different. And he's married to the studio head. Right? So what the fuck? But there were things that happened in that direction where I said it's not worth it. I'll tell you a story that might explain all of it to you in a different way. When I was about 12, I went to St. Emmerich grade school, which was a Hungarian American twin language grade school. And for a Christmas present, I got a toy that was a mini printing press, so you could type in some letters and then move this thing around on a piece of paper, and so you would have your own little newspaper, right? So I invented this thing called the St. Emmerich's Herald, okay, and I wrote a story, the big story, and I took it into class so all the kids could see it. And of course, the nuns looked at it. And the big story was that the one of the most popular girls in the seventh grade, I think, had been seen on a hillside overlooking Cleveland's flats in the tall grass, having an intimate relationship with an eighth grader. I
There's the twisted little man. What are you, twisted little boy?
hated them both, right? And they were existing people. I hated them both. Yeah, and the parish priest, whom I liked, called me in and said, "You just can't do this. These are people. This is bullshit." I said, "Father, it's not bullshit. I saw them in the grass." He said, "I don't care about that, but you can't write this kind of stuff." Okay, so I want you to collect all these papers again and burn them. And I said, "No, Father, I can't do that." And he said, "Well, why not?" "Because I wrote it. I can't do that. I can't take it back now." Okay. You put that little incident, flash it through
Yes.
years of Hollywood and all of that. And maybe you're right. Maybe that was just a little man's first real appearance.
But you
Then
know what, Joe? You've really gone to the mat on this. You got paid, I don't know, what was it, $4 or $5 million for a one night stand, just based on $4 million based on a napkin. And you ultimately took your name off of that movie, didn't you, when it came out?
when Mike Vegas came in, Mike was the hottest thing in town after leaving Las Vegas. He came out to Malibu, came out to the house. Same story. He said, I just love this thing. I'm just gonna shoot it. He said, it's absolutely wonderful. He said, congratulations. I said, great. Okay, the studio sends me the shooting script. and everything has changed, literally. You know, the main characters are different. There's a black man introduced into the mix. The and it was a very I didn't want that man to be depicted as a black man because he wasn't a very nice man, and I have my own issues about the civil rights movement, so I didn't want that to happen. But there are all these changes. You know, the bigot didn't even understand that because he's a Brit, and and I said no, you get this is wrong. And the studio backed Vegas up. And I said, well, I'm sorry. I'm taking my name off the thing. They said, well, you can't do that. And, I said, yes, I can. I'm doing it. Sue me. So,
Wow.
um, did. Mm, Sue,
Did they sue you?
of
No. But you took your name off it, but you got to keep the 4 million, right?
course.
Wow. That's a
But
not a bad.
I wrote a hell of a script, and I'm sorry to this day. I can't watch the thing. I began once, but I can't watch it. It could have been fun and it could have been really terrific. It's essentially all dialogue. A couple meet and then they just spend the night together and they talk about their lives. And that's the whole structure of the piece. It's almost like a little play, that way. But anyway, you see that all that shit began when I was 12 with the St. Emmerich's Herald. So,
Let me tell you an experience that then I saw you directly chastise a writer director,
yeah,
Shane Black.
right.
And we were sitting there at lunch, and you asked Shane Black, you said, Shane, what do you do when when you're meeting with the studios or the producers and they have comments or changes to your script? And he said, oh, I've got this really clever little trick that I do. He said, I act like I'm making notes and I act like I'm taking their input. But actually, he says, I'm not. I'm really not writing much of anything at all. And you paused and said, why are you doing that? Why do you do that? That ruins it for the rest of us who are trying to defend our work. Do you remember that meeting?
That's a backstory. The Bill Goldman, when I started screenwriting, William Goldman was the top screenwriter. And the Bill Goldman wrote some terrific novels and wrote some terrific scripts as well. But then he wrote a book about screenwriting itself called The Adventures in the Screen Trade, which I read as I was beginning to be a screenwriter. And in that book, he specifically gives that advice. If you're talking to a studio head or a powerful studio person, pretend you're taking notes and listening to their ideas. Um, the at the same time, another successful screenwriter, Ron Bass, said that the screenwriter is there to fulfill the director's vision. Okay. And I thought to myself, and as the years went by, I wrote it and said it. I thought to myself that Bill Goldman's advice is essentially hooking. Instead of saying, I don't think that's a good idea. Just pretend that you're writing it and make them believe that you're doing what they're suggesting to you. And Ron Bass, I felt, was utterly cockeyed. And if you write an original script, now if you're adapting something, or if you're coming off of someone's idea, but if it's an original script, it's your vision. It's no one else's vision. If it's an adaptation, then it's a novelist's vision that you're translating to the screen. And so, I like Shane very much. When I remember that moment, and I remember specifically it aped Bill Goldman's book. Now, when I began screenwriting, unfortunately, most screenwriters did exactly that. You didn't see any public controversies over scripts. There was one person that I admired that I got to know, and Betty Jayevsky wrote The Network and The Hospital, in Altered States and several other things. And Patty finally got it into the contract, if you can imagine, that not a word could be changed of the final script. He got fucked anyway because with Altered States, Ken Russell directed it, who was this crazy Brit. But Ken took his script and discovered this clause in the contract and went insane. So what he did was he had everyone do the dialogue in machine gun style, so you couldn't really understand what the hell they were saying. So um, the, uh, the one of my favorite movie stories is that when Patty died, on his tombstone, he had put "I tried." That was it. So I've kidded around with my tombstone saying I tried harder. You know,
Yeah.
and that's how far we go.
I'm going to give you and Mark, I know we're coming close on the hour or a little maybe even a little after, but I'm going to give you a chance, Joe, before we do our wrap up here, to deny this script that you wrote. This is
Oh
the
boy.
rumor. Some say it's a rumor, some say it's true. Did you or did you not write a script about the president of the United States who fucks a cow, an actual animal, farm animal cow, not an ugly woman, as some might disparage you. But did you do a script that the president fucks a cow, and did you sell it?
I mean, this is a good story.
Oh God, that means it's true.
My God.
On this note, I did. It's called Sacred Cows, and it was about an incumbent president running for re-election. He's in his 60s, late 60s, and he's a farm boy. And the during his campaign, he gets close to the small town where he grew up, and goes back to the farmhouse where he grew up. He sees with personal problems with his kids and his wife and all of that, and wakes up in the middle of the night and is semi asleep. He goes down to the barn and fucks the car that fucks the kind of cow that he used to fuck when he was a little boy, as a farm boy.
As we all did, of course.
Lorraine Avenue, luckily there weren't many cows, so but that spared me that. Anyway, the the other side somehow gets a hold of this and comes up with a hidden camera, and it turns into a comedic drama. So I write this as a spec, and when it's done, I give it to Guy McElwain, my agent, and Guy, because they used to represent Steven Spielberg, and because Steven and I knew each other and had almost worked together on a guy named Joe, Guy loves the scripts and gives it to Steven. And Steven unexpectedly says, "This is my next picture. This is
Oh, what?
my next picture, and I love it. And it's hilarious, and it's real, blah blah blah." And of course, we're overjoyed. He sends it to Stanley Kubrick because he knows there's going to be flack over it, and he wants Kubrick to produce it so that there are two big powerhouse names on it. And so he sends it to Stanley, and Stanley sends him a note that I used to have a copy of. It says, "Dear Stephen, this is the funniest script I've ever read, but I don't want to get within 1,000 miles of it. Thank you." Right? Stephen says, I'm like, I love it, but I can't. I want some cover on it, and I'm part of my people are really upset that I want to do it, blah, blah, blah. This is all about 1990, I guess. No, 89, maybe 88, 89. So Stephen says I can't do it. Guy sends it out to a whole bunch of people, and a whole bunch of directors respond. Eddie Olmos, Ian Softly, Blake Edwards, among others, who was a real possibility because Blake was out and he does comedic stuff. Blake loved it. Eddie wanted to do it. Softly wanted to do it. And Blake wanted to do it. And Blake and his partner, Tony Adams, and I have a meeting with Laddie, who is running the ownership of the script. It belongs to MGM. Because I did sell it. I'm sorry, I'm going. I did sell it earlier as part of a three picture package, which wasn't named. So yes, it was. They did own it, but it was previously bought with that before they saw it. Anyway, the Blake Laddie's a good friend of mine and guys, and Laddie says, "Guys, I just can't make this thing. I mean, and you can't do a picture about about a guy fucking a cow and all this stuff. It's bad."
How
Um,
dare he?
Okay, the 4 or 5 years go by. Excuse me, Naomi and I are barely married. And we're together coming out of the Four Seasons after at night after some kind of industry banquet. So there are a lot of people around outside. We're standing around outside waiting for our car, and here comes this black pickup truck, and comes up toward the end, and Steven's driving it, and Kate's next to him. And Steven's driving, he jumps out of the car, leaps out, sitting toward me, and puts his arms up, and he yells, "I should have done sacred cows."
What the
I,
hell? Just right there in the
I
middle of
was
everything.
waiting for you. I was waiting for you to say, yeah, we gave it to Steven Spielberg. He liked it, went through some revisions. He released it as Saving Private Ryan. That, that's what I was waiting for.
Not a bad scenario, yeah. So he goes,
Joe,
we're all just staring at him, and everyone's staring at us. He jumps back, and they leave. The next day, we get a call in Malibu, and it's Steven. And he said, "Listen, I got to do this. I'm sorry, I can't get it out of my head." He said, "But this is what I want to do." He said, "I'll produce it, and you direct it." And I said, "Steven, one, I don't have the talent to direct a picture. I've never been interested in it. I don't have the talent to do it. But thank you. But he said you have too, and he said some words about I'll be there on every day, and I'll help you and all of that." I said the other reason is that I love this woman. I just met her. Our relationship is in the beginning. We're both head and over heels in love. We don't want to. And I know the time that goes into directing, and I absolutely know that I couldn't be around her as much as I want to be. And I said, "I'm sorry." He said, "Well, you're making a mistake." And I said, "Very possibly I am, but I'm really sorry." And a couple of days go by. He calls back and he said, "Okay, let's try this." And Tony Bill is a friend of mine, and they're close personal friends. And Tony directed some things, but I hadn't directed anything in a while. He said, "I'm going to try to do this with me producing and with Tony directing it. Let's see what happens." So he did, and they turned him down, of course, and that's the end of the story with Sacred Cow. Now, what did happen to it is that it became known as the most famous unproduced script in Hollywood history. The
oh,
writers, the
yeah.
Writers Guild did a big feature on it, and other publications picked that one up. So Mel, when I did work with him on the Maccabees, one night at dinner said, "What happened to that script where your guy fucks a cow?" And I said, "How do you know about that?" He said, "Well, they sent it to me and said if I wanted to do it." And he said, and I thought about it. I said, "Oh, not me, but."
Yeah, it just doesn't fit the image, maybe.
Oh, I know exactly. But good question, Jeremy.
Well, Marc, you're always wonderful about doing these kind of key takeaways from meetings and things of that nature. I mean, a key takeaway, I'm curious about yours, but a key takeaway from me is, you know, I guess not being afraid to stand up for what you believe in terms of creativity, even if it literally maybe costs you money. And certainly the company, the agencies we've worked for do not want to lose money. They don't want to upset the clients. They want everybody to be happy. And when it comes to creativity, sometimes people aren't happy. I don't know what are your takeaway? That's one of mine. Are any of yours? Anything you note here?
Uh, you know, uh, yeah, to close us out for this episode, Jeremy, if you think for a second that I'm able in this moment to think about anything but cow fucking, you're crazy. I am. It is going to be a long time before I can think about anything else but that script.
Let me
But
ask, since this is occupying your thinking, in the course of writing that script, I did do a little research into what goes into cow fucking. And the bottom line is that it gets very sticky.
please tell
I
me that this was not original research that you did.
Empiric.
I think I read it, but my memory is a little faulty, but I think I read
Well, Joe, I'm just thank you again. And I want to tell our listeners and now viewers, we've got another episode coming up, and it's going to take a little bit of actually, it's going to take a very serious turn. We were going to, after celebrating a lot of creativity in Joe's life and the things that he's done and accomplished and how he stood up for what he believed in, creatively or otherwise, with his firm beliefs, both spiritual and in terms of social causes. The next episode, we're going to talk about a tragic family secret that ultimately Joe was made aware of involving his father that almost destroyed his career and forever changed his relationship with his dad. Really serious thing, and actually dovetails into a movie that Joe had written earlier and didn't even realize that that scenario would be playing out in real life with his own family. The other thing we're going to discuss is we talked about it at the top of this episode, is Joe's battle with stage four throat cancer. And I got to tell you, if you want something that's going to put a crimp in your writing, and of course, more importantly, threaten your life, try getting stage four throat cancer. I was part of watching this occur. It was very difficult, and it actually changed Joe in a lot of ways and made him stronger in other ways. And that's what we're going to be talking about
And
the next.
let's also not forget, we teased it at the beginning, but a little bit of a deeper dive into Joe's spirituality and his rebirth. Something that I'm looking forward to talking to you with. Looking forward to speaking to you about. It all comes to a kind of a fascinating crescendo for these episodes. And Joe, I know I speak for Jeremy, but he's related to you, so he's going to say this shit anyway. I have. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us, for telling us some amazing stories, for talking about the creativity that I know a lot of our listeners and viewers want to hear about. So thank you very much for the time. Can't wait till next time.
Mark, and this applies to both you and Jeremy. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it. Mark, I'm very much looking forward to talking to you about my personal issues and how on the road to being what I would define myself being as an honorary Jew, because it's meant so much in my life. So thank you guys. On a much less serious note, Mark, especially for you, if your thought process revolves around that cow, my advice is a good dry towel.
Oh my God, would you stop? That's it for Stay Ugly, Irresponsible, and Childish, my friends. Thank you. This is Jeremy Baca.
This is Mark Levy,
Thanks,
and we will
everybody.
see you next week.